Today it's my pleasure to introduce a friend and a supporter of this club for a long, long time. Jim Koepfinger is the Director of Technology and Communications for the Township of Moon. He started supporting the club back in the days when Paul Collier was your program person. And okay, thank you. And a fellow named Ron Potter was running the camera, which Pat does for us now. That's over 20 years ago, and we don't do every program, but that's probably 700 or 800 programs that the men's club has had played through Jim's television station in Moon, the cable. And incidentally, that's available to everybody. Some of you will have to be online if you don't live in Moon. And next week I'll have something on the table how to find the programs online, or last week's program. Jim is in his work at the television station has won several Telly Awards. These are national awards for excellence in programming or communications or something like that. So he comes to us with a couple prizes in his hand, and I'll let Jim take it from here.
Well, good morning, gentlemen. Good morning. I'm going to tell you a little bit about cable history and a little bit about Moon Community Access Television's history, which is my history. I've been the director of Moon Community Access. I was the director of Moon Community Access Television since, well, almost since it started. I took over in 1985, but we'll get there in a minute. Let's talk about cable history as a whole. Cable history goes back a long way, actually. Cable television started, surprisingly enough, in Pennsylvania. A little town called Mahoney City, just outside of Philadelphia, in the spring of 1948. That was known as Community Antenna Television, or CATV. Actually put just a giant antenna up, ran antenna wire from there to several homes that were in the valley and not getting good television reception. And the next thing you know, cable television was born. Later that year, let me make sure I get this right, Astoria, Oregon, a gentleman by the name of Ed Parsons, who would become kind of an important character in the world of cable television, is the first gentleman to actually use coaxial cable rather than antenna cable to get that signal from that antenna to people's homes. And in 1950, once again, Pennsylvania has a lot to do with cable history. In a place called Lansford, PA, a Robert Tarleton, who would kind of become the father of cable television, is the first man to offer television from Philadelphia, PA, to these people in Lansford, which they could not pick up prior. And he charged a fee. And that's when cable television was truly born, right? As soon as you get to pay for it, now it's real. So things would advance, and actually after the 1950s, this started to become a thing. This CATV, community antenna television, started all over the United States. It was popping up everywhere where there was any place where there might be a valley, someplace it was hard to pick up, the broadcast television, which is what television was in that time. And in fact, it was a huge growth industry. About $15 billion would be spent in the next few years to build up cable antenna systems. It's the largest growth industry since World War II. By 1962, there are almost 800 cable systems serving about 850,000 people. So, of course, the FCC, the government's got to get involved. So in 1962, the FCC starts taking control of some of this stuff. One of the things they did in 62, though, was create public, educational, and government television. All right? That is it's what Moon Community Access Television is. It's a PEG channel, okay? So that's when it started. Unfortunately, that's when the government created it. Didn't really take off for a while. But cable television did. By the 70s, they were starting to create programming specifically for cable television. By this time, of course, we're using satellites instead of antennas to get these TV signals. In 1972, the very first paid network is launched, HBO. By 76, Ted Turner and a fellow from Pittsburgh by the name of Jim Roddy, who was working for him at the time, start the first superstation, TBS. And in 1979, in a little town called Bristol, Connecticut, ESPN is born. And cable television will never be the same, right? Well, by the early 1980s, local origination programming was starting to take off. There were a lot of places up in the New England states that had their own community television stations by then. It was looking good. Well, by 1984, the FCC gets their fingers involved again, and they create the Cable Act of 1984. The Cable Act of 1984 now requires cable companies with more than 3,500 subscribers to give a public access station to their communities that they're in. The FCC creates a thing called franchising. Because the cable companies are now using the public right-of-ways to get their signal to your home, it's the local community's responsibility to police those right-of-ways. So to offset that cost, they tell the cable companies they have to pay 3% of their profit to the communities that they're in, with a stipulation that if they're operating a PEG channel, they can get 5%. Well, this all works out very well for the township of Moon, because in the early 80s, two things were happening. Not only were community stations popping up all over New England, here in Moon Township, Sharon Church was broadcasting their church services over the local cable system. And Robert Morris College then had their own channel for educational programming. So Moon Township, feeling like they were, as we all do here on the western side of the city, always feel like we're a little neglected by the big media of Pittsburgh. Moon Township said, well, what can we do to communicate with our residents better? And they put a group together, an ad hoc committee, involving the then pastor of Sharon Church, the provost of Robert Morris University, and a few residents. And they decided, they should create their own community access channel, a way for the people of Moon Township to communicate with each other, as well as the board to be able to get information out to the community. Well, as luck would have it, they started that about 82, and in 84, just when they were getting ready to start their channel, the government comes along and says, hey, you don't have to worry about paying for it because we got this 5% franchise fee. So that worked out very well for them. But one other thing worked out really well for Moon Township in 1984. I was out of college and looking for a job. So I went to Moon Township. I heard they were starting a TV channel, so I went there. I got involved. At first, I was just a volunteer. And then in November of the year, well, the MCA TV went on the air January 14th, 1985. And I was like a part-time employee there. It was very interesting. We'll get to the technology side of this in a minute, but we were just putting things together with, shoestring and bubble gum, It was not the kind of TV stuff that we have today in Moon Township. We have some very, very nice equipment. But I was the engineer. I was the engineer. I was the only one who really knew about television. The original director was actually a radio guy, right? Talked his way into the job, looked good on camera, but he didn't know anything about television. So that was me. It was a community station. So that meant that we needed to train community volunteers in how to run camera, how to do television shows. Well, I taught that class. And in that very first class was a gentleman by the name of Ron Potter, who was the first of the senior men's club cameramen to come and put your program on the air. We had a lot of very interesting shows when we first started out. One of the shows that we had was an aerobics exercise program with a young lady by the name of Linda Francis. Well, Linda's still with us 36 years later. She's not doing aerobics anymore, but she's doing a senior workout program. So it's good to see, people get involved and stay involved in community television. Well, we'll go back to some more of MCA in a minute. Let's continue with some more cable history. By the 1990s, there are more than 65 million subscribers to cable television across the United States, and there are over 170 made-for-cable television program networks. So at this point in time, you can now see anything from hunting, fishing shows to car programs to sports to, just anything you want, it's out there on some cable channel. And it was a matter of whether or not, this is when we all started going, well, I don't really like shows about this, to kind of get rid of this channel and get that channel instead. And the cable companies, with the technology they had at the time, were like, no, that's not how that works. We can put all this stuff into one cable and it gets to your house, but I can't give you this and not give you that. Other than pay television, they figured that out, right? If you didn't pay for it, you didn't get it. So no more HBO if you don't buy it, no more Cinemax or whatever. But they wouldn't build what they called tiers, and that was something that the FCC gets involved in again, rears their ugly head in 1996, and they opened up some more free trade for the cable companies. It's also the time that internet is now being delivered by the cable companies. And the FCC says that internet is not a cable service. Well, that's kind of important to us because we get 5% of whatever they make from their cable. Well, guess what? We don't get a dime from the internet, right? As the FCC said, the internet's not a cable service. Interesting, because it came to the house in cable. But whatever. They also, at the same time, changed how community television was going to work. No more was community television a guarantee by the cable company. They took that out. They said, if you want a community station, you got to negotiate it with the cable company. You probably have to pay. But fortunately, Moon was already had their cable station by this time, so it didn't affect Moon too much. But things were changing in the 90s for Moon Community Access Television. When we started in the Moon Schools. In 1984, they had an agreement with Moon Schools, and we built the TV studio in the high school. And we worked for 9 years out of Moon Schools, trying to build this relationship with the community where we would train volunteers and they would make their own programs. But being in the school kind of limited that. A lot of the residents weren't comfortable coming into a school to do a program. So in the early 90s, Moon Township bought the old Montour Heights Country Club clubhouse, and they were going to turn it into a library. So I went to my bosses and I said, hey, there's a spot in the basement you guys aren't using. Let me have it. Let me make that the community television station so that we can bring residents in and they feel more comfortable doing shows. And so that's what we did. We opened there in 1994. And while I lost a lot of young volunteers because we were no longer in the school, the problem with student volunteers is as soon as they graduate, you never see them again, right? So I end up getting a lot of community volunteers coming in. And that worked out very well. And MCA TV grew greatly in the 90s because we were able to get residents in and programming grew. We had programs from, well, obviously the exercise show. We had programs on auto repair, computers, how to build a computer. We had children's programming. Of course, we had sports programming. I started covering Moon football when I took over in 1985, and have been covering it ever since. It's 36 years we've been covering Moon football. A lot of things have changed in that realm too, but we had a story time program from the library. They came down, they learned how to run the equipment and did that show. So there's a lot of really interesting programs that came across that were community produced. And this is why, one of the reasons we go out and talk to people. You're all here, you all have some time on your hands. If at any point you want to come learn how to run a camera like Earl or Pat, we'll take you. Okay? Well, we move into the 2000s, things are really changing in the world of cable television because it's now digital, right? We've got phone, we've got internet coming into our house over our cable system. Well, one of the biggest things that happened to Moon Township is that in 2001, AT&T cable system joins with Comcast cable system and becomes the world's largest cable company with over 22 million subscribers. Well, that was us. We were in Moon. We were with Comcast. And so how we were delivering the signal home changes with Comcast. Prior to the early 2000s, our signal was sent from our TV station over a sub-frequency on the cable, right? You had your frequencies that all your channels line up with. Well, to get that signal from our location back to their head end and back out to the community, we had this box that we put the video into, and it converted it to a frequency that ran between channels 3 and 4. And that went out to the cable company and then got turned around and was brought back on channel 14. Okay. Well, things change, right? Well, with the new digital world, you can't have this sub-frequency stuff going on anymore. And it wasn't very good, by the way. If anybody remembers MCA TV back in those days, the signal was pretty weak, didn't really look all that great. So with the new digital world, of course, that has to go away, and we get digital television, right? So now I've got a direct digital feed, which has to be on its own line, right? So originally it was on a cable, but it was a direct digital cable that went back to the head end at Comcast. And as time continues to move forward into the 2000s in this digital realm where we have on-demand television and we have high-def television, as the digital world advances, we also get a thing called fiber optics. Fiber optic is an amazing technology transferring digital information to light. where we could run 300 feet without boosting the signal on a copper cable, we can now run over 3 miles on a piece of glass. So, of course, Comcast comes in and says, hey, we're going to give you a fiber optic return to our head end. I'm like, great. This is good stuff because now our signal's getting better. So we get the fiber optic feed and we get their fiber optic, we call it a laser. We got a laser at our end, we get the laser receiver at the other end. Signal steps up one more time. Now MCA TV is looking even better. So with that same technology, things change for us in our sports broadcast world as well. You know, for many years, we're out covering a football game per se, or a softball game or whatever, and I've got hundreds of feet of copper wire running everywhere. And it's not very good, right? And once again, if I get over 300 feet, I start to lose the signal. In fact, now with HD TV, you don't even approach 300 feet, and the signal starts to drop off because the world of digital communications is very interesting, as you probably noticed. You either get it or you don't get it. Remember the old television? You could like tune in, you got shadows, and you got ghosts, and you could see some things, but you got it, right? Well, in the world of digital, if it doesn't reach a certain threshold of signal, it just simply doesn't show up. Well, we were having the same problems with trying to get cameras back to the production trailer, right? 300 feet, otherwise you got to find electricity, you got to put a booster in the middle, and then you got to run it back some more. Well, along comes fiber optics, and so we now have this wonderful way of getting signals from all over the place back to the trailer. And where this really comes into play is in 2005, Moon Community Access Television joins forces with Robert Morris University to start covering sports. And that was just hockey at the time. It was really kind of funny. I tried for years to offer my services to Robert Morris. As an alum, we had a production trailer, right? And I'm like, hey, let me come help you promote your sports. You know how football, and you're playing at Moon High School at the time. I'm like, my equipment's right there. Let me help you do your games. But for whatever reason, that never connected. Well, in 2005, one of the students from Robert Morris comes to me and he says, hey, we have a new hockey team. We're playing on the island. Can we cover the games? And I said, hey, if you can clear it with the college, I'll be happy to go do hockey games, right? And because it was off campus, I guess, it was all good. Yeah, you guys can go down there and you can cover those hockey games, right? It wasn't a really important sport for the school at the time. It was off campus. Great. So we go down, we start covering hockey games. And after the first season, I'm on the second season, and I'm shooting the games, and I get invited upstairs by the athletic director to their hat trick club. And one of the trustees is sitting there, and he introduces me. And the trustee says, I've watched your hockey games. I'm like, oh? Thinking, uh-oh. We're in trouble. There's something, and he says, no, they look really good. He goes, how come our football doesn't look that way? I said, well, because I don't do football. He said, you will. And we did. Starting the next season, the school approached and said, hey, would you come cover football for us? And I said, absolutely. Wanted to do it for years, right? So at this time, they're already playing on their own campus at the Joe Walton Stadium. Very big stadium, if you've ever been there. It's a pretty large facility. And so my first problem was, when we get there, it was like, how am I going to get copper signal all over the stadium? Now, a lot of it was pre-wired, but they're long runs. So it ends up being like the runs are going here, you got to put a booster in, and it comes back here, you got to put another booster in. So we're fighting this. For years, I'm fighting that kind of technology, like trying to get these signals from all over the place back to where we need them to get them to make them work. And then, of course, fiber optic shows up. No more problems. I'm doing high-def television out of Robert Morris. I can put cameras anywhere I want. Just run them back on fiber. Works beautifully, right? Well, one of the things that's a problem with all this wonderful technology, I'm going to knock this microphone over, is that with it comes, you know, the FCC again, right? Cable companies in particular, okay, well, let's go back a little bit because in the, I actually have a date here somewhere. Well, actually, whoops, dropping stuff. Don't worry about it. Before we get into this whole cable, I did want to talk about this. Does anybody know the history of cable in Moon Township in particular? Does anybody remember who the first cable company was? Yeah, the first cable company was a gentleman by the name of Dick Fabick. Does that name ring a bell to anybody? Yeah, he ran that CA TV. He had an antenna and was running antenna communications over the hills to the people in the valley and providing cable television for them. Well, he was bought out by a company called Astro Cablevision. If we go back that far, if you remember that one, who eventually was bought out by New Channels, who was bought out by AT&T, who was bought out by Comcast, and then, you know, in the, I gotta get the exact year because I have it here someplace. What year did Verizon come to MCA TV? Well, maybe I don't have it here. Well, it was in the early 2000s. Verizon comes and says, we want to be competition to Comcast, something we've never had, right? We always had one cable system, so if you wanted cable TV, that's who you got. But this is also around the time that satellite television was becoming a thing, right? You could buy satellite TV or you could buy cable TV. But Verizon came in and said, look, we want to offer another option. We're going to do. So we negotiated a franchise agreement with them, got the Moon Community Access Television on their cable system. But because they were new, we strong-armed them and we got another channel, right? We got a government channel. So that now we could separate out the community programming from all the government programming. And then we were able to take that little piece, you know, the little gem that we got from Verizon, and we forced it into Comcast. So now Moon Community Access Television has two channels on both systems, a government channel and a community access channel. So this is really good stuff for us. So now the government channel is run by the township, and we work with Koepfinger, and we're working with Crescent, and we're getting their public meetings on as well as our public meetings, their school board meetings. So this is really good information for the community. This is real reason for having a PEG channel, right? Getting that government information out. Well, once again, when we get back into the 2000s, right, because everything's now digital, we've got cable companies that are saying, hey, we're not cable companies anymore. We don't provide video to the home through coaxial cable. We're now an internet company that provides television over the internet. Technically, they're not wrong. So now we have some cable companies now appealing to the FCC to get rid of the franchise fees. Well, good for them, but bad for anybody who's operating a community television station because that's how they're funded, right? So, well, that's a battle that we'll wait to see how that turns out. But eventually, cable companies as we know them are probably going to go away because with the change in technology now, everything is over the internet. You can now watch TV with the internet. You don't have to have cable to do it anymore, right? So will that be the end of community television? I hope not. You know, that's one of the battles that we have to face going forward is how do we survive as a community television station in an internet world? Well, we'll probably have to do advertising for one thing, which is never a great thing, right? Because advertising changes things, as we all know. Just ask public television. They can tell you all about it. The FCC fixed them too, by the way, a long time ago. Took away a bunch of their funding, and now public television, which is funny, in the digital world, right? Public television, Channel 13, as we know them here in Pittsburgh, and Channel 16, they have 8 channels now, right? They have 8 channels. they're digital channels. So if you have a digital tuner and you're using an antenna instead of getting cable, right, you can tune into any one of those channels. They got all this wonderful way to get information out to you. Guess what? Their funding is so bad that those 8 channels are running basically 2 sets of programs, and that's it, right? Because they don't have any money. They can't produce programs anymore. So while the government helped grow this industry, they continue to help kill the world of public television and community television. And I get it. There's, you know, money, tax money is hard to come by, right? So the problem is that community television isn't funded by tax dollars. It's funded by the cable companies. So our argument is we need to keep them funding that community television because it doesn't really hurt them. The truth is, I'll be honest with you, the consumer pays for it, as always, right? Cable companies don't pay for anything. But it comes back to you, and there's called a PEG fee on your cable bill that you pay, and then that's passed through to the MCA TV, in our case, but whatever community station you might have. I don't know if there's anything else I wanted to tell you. I can tell you a little bit more about the equipment changes. That's what I really wanted to talk about. When we talked about, when I started in this industry, well, I started in high school, to be honest, doing television. Moon High School has always been a fairly affluential school, so they had cameras and video recorders. Well, those video recorders were tape-to-tape, black and white little recorders. They looked like an audio tape machine, only with bigger, thicker reels on it, right? And we had black and white cameras, and I started filming Moon sports back then for coaches. And I loved it, because I knew when I was probably 10 years old what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be in television, all right? Of course, at first I thought I wanted to be in front of the camera, but, you know, I didn't have the face for it, so went behind the camera, and I've enjoyed it ever since. But so when we started MCA TV in 1985, we had single tube cameras, which was kind of a new technology. Prior to that, you had to have 3 tubes, right, to get color television. You had to have a red tube, a green tube, and a blue tube, or you couldn't get color TV. Well, here we are in 85. Whew, we're at cutting edge of technology. We can have 1 tube that picked up all the colors. Okay? We thought it was great. Yeah. Because they were cheap. But they also didn't look as good as those other cameras did either. But it allowed us to open the station and get it going. We had started with a little production switcher. A switcher is the little box that the technical director sits at and picks which cameras go on the air. And it might mix in like graphics or whatever, right? So this is a fancy little piece of equipment that brings it all together. Well, ours was about the size of this podium top, okay? We could have 6 inputs going into it. But it worked, and we made it work, and we did television. I had 3 recorders. I got one that recorded program, and I had 2 more that we used for editing, okay? And back then, to edit TV, not like film. Like film, you cut, right? You took the razor and you cut the film and you took this part out and then you put another part in and you taped it together. Well, in video, you can't do that. If you did that to the videotape, it would tear the heads out of the recorder, right? It has to be solid. So what you had to do was re-record, right? What you wanted. So you recorded from the original tape to the edit tape the pieces that you wanted, okay, in the order that you wanted them. And if you wanted to do special effects, like a fade or between them, or any other, a wipe or whatever between the two shots, well, now you needed 2 decks that were feeding to the third deck, right? And that had to run through one of those little production switchers. And you had to time them all up so that when this one got to where you wanted it, it started the other deck and it went and you did the fade, right? And you got your finished product. Well, editing was a real art back then, okay? Now, it's all on computers. We just digitized the whole thing. I shouldn't even digitize. It comes digitized. Shoot with cameras that go straight to chips, right? You put it on your computer, You can do anything you want with it. Things which used to be, you used to have to spend 4 years in college to learn to edit. Now, there are kids who are 8 years old, got computers, and they're editing video, right? So, yeah, technology has changed dramatically. We went from that little TV studio to our new studio, and we also have a TV production trailer. That's how we got tied in with Robert Morris. I started, the first trailer that I had was an old mining trailer that we bought from government surplus, okay? And it was a big blue bomb. They put it together in time to do Moon Township's bicentennial in 1988, right? Big event, right, for Moon Township, 200 years old. We had all these events going on. First, it was on Memorial Day. They were there at the courtyard in front of the township building. We had speeches, going on. Meanwhile, my wife's pregnant with my daughter, going into labor. What a great day, right? So, 4th of July, we had more speechifying going on. And of course, when we were there, we had our production trailer, and we're putting together these programs live as it's happening. Of course, we couldn't get it out live, but, at least we were putting it together live. So it was fun. And as we started doing sports with that trailer, we started to see the real value of having this production trailer. We started doing public meetings with that trailer. So the next one was a new trailer, no longer the mining trailer that had an air conditioner built in, but it was still pretty small. And we continued to grow, and that's when I started working with Robert Morris, and so we ended up buying a real production trailer. It's a 20-foot box trailer with multiple air conditioning units, equipment racks built in, beautiful. We got it wrapped. It's gorgeous, right? And in the meantime, we're bringing in all this wonderful equipment. As opposed to that little 6-input switcher that I started MCA TV with back in 1985, I now have a 36-input switcher in the production trailer. I've got digital instant replay. I've got high-definition graphics, right? And we're doing ESPN broadcasts with Robert Morris University. So we've come a long way at MCA TV. And once again, you guys can be a part of that. So don't forget that. Come join me. I'll teach you what to do, and we'll get you doing TV. All right? I think that's it for me. If anybody has some questions, I'm sure I would be happy to answer them.
Jim, thank you very much. Any questions for Jim?
Yes, sir.
What I don't understand is the cost of Comcast. Now, I was out of the country last month, okay? My last bill that I paid was $202. Anybody writes a Comcast bill, a check for $202, got to be crazy. With all the technology in this world, you cannot tell me that they can't put something over the phone lines. I don't care how they do it. There got to be a way to do it that is going to save money. And now I just got because I was out of the country last month, I just got a new bill, $417. $417. Can you believe that? I can't, honest to God, I can't believe that. Now, I don't understand why, with all the technology, we put men on the moon, for God's sakes. With all the technology in this world, we can't hook something up with the phone lines or something to do something with this.
Well, the first thing I understand is there's no such thing as phone lines anymore.
Well,
what we have is fiber optic backbone that feeds the nation. And unfortunately, fiber optics is extremely expensive. So copper phone lines are going away. There won't even be, within the next 10 years, there won't even be copper phone lines going to your house. The people there's people out there in the world talking about internet. I'm sure that's what you have internet, you have cable television, you have phone, right? This is why your bill is so high.
Now, why do I have to pay for the telephone? I don't use the telephone. My telephone is dead.
Well, you don't have to. You can actually get a package that doesn't have phone.
Okay,
included.
For all intents and purposes, I use my cell phone.
Right.
And that's all I do. That's all I do. I get all my calls in and out on the cell phone.
Right.
And again, I don't understand why.
Well, you can get packages that don't include the cell phone. But the house phone. Unfortunately, it's not going to save you a tremendous amount of money because phone unfortunately, phone is the cheapest part of the system, right? Once it's set up, there's no reoccurring costs as far as the cable company is concerned, right? So phone's cheap. Internet and cable, those are the expensive ones. Internet speeds are what you pay for. If you want faster speeds, if you want to stream TV, you got to pay for the faster speeds. Therefore, pay more money, right? Because it takes more bandwidth. And everything in this, and that's the one thing you understand in this digital world, it's all about bandwidth, okay? How much space on that fiber, or that copper fiber, because at the end of the day, it's still copper fiber at the home. We're not fiber throughout the house yet, right? Comcast only has a fiber backbone. So they go to the neighborhoods and then it breaks down to copper, right?
Well, I have Comcast.
Right, so you have Comcast, so that's what's happening. They've got a fiber backbone, and they'll claim it's the largest fiber backbone in the nation. Well, it is, okay? That means they just reach more cities with it than anybody else. But unfortunately, when it gets to the city or gets to your neighborhood, that's where they break it down from fiber to copper. Okay, so then you might have 50 homes on one node. Well, that's all copper coming to the house. Well, that copper only has so much bandwidth that it can use. So you're now jamming phone, cable television, internet, all through that copper line, okay? So something's going to give, right? But you're going to pay if you want faster internet speeds. You're probably giving up something on the cable side or whatever. But they're using amazing technology to bring this stuff together. But someday in America, there will be fiber, which Verizon does, but they're not a very big network at the end of the day. They bring fiber to the home, right? It goes to a box on the side of the house, and that's where it's broke out into copper. So they're able to better control how much information is coming to the house and give you a lot better signal, which is what obviously they claim, that it's better because it's but it still breaks down to copper at the end of the day, right? Someday, in the not too far future, everything will be fiber optics. Fiber optics, tremendous bandwidth capability over copper, tremendous. Just so, will we see prices leveling out? Will they ever come down? No, because fiber is very expensive. So as we continue to build fiber backbones across this nation, has to be paid for somewhere, and that's where we're paying for it, right?
Exactly.
But someday this will all level off because once there is fiber across the nation, well, now it's just maintenance, right? We're no longer building, and the technology is that keeps advancing at leaps and bounds will hopefully start to level off a little bit, at least as far as the internet and well, we won't be cable television, like I said. It'll be television over internet. So it'll all have to do with the bandwidth that you're bringing internet into your home, and phone is over internet. They call it IP phone, okay? And so it's all going to be one fiber, right? Coming to your house, feeding all your communications technology, and well, obviously we see this. It's coming, right? Never going to change it. And they're working very hard to take government control out of it by making it fiber optics and claim it's not cable, which is why we'll see what the FCC finally rules when that comes down. I can't imagine the FCC wanting to give up too much control. So, but yeah, unfortunately, that's why we pay big prices for. But you know, if you're of the younger generation,
and I get a discount too because I'm a veteran.
Right?
So they give me whatever.
Yeah, it's not a lot. Yeah. Well, if you're the younger generation, you're doing what they call cutting the cable, all right? Which is they're doing away with everything but internet. They're only paying for internet because they can do everything. Once again, you can do everything over the internet today, and that's what they're doing, right? So they're watching their TV over things called like Roku, right? Or through Stream TV, or there's a whole bunch of these packages out there that let you watch broadcast television over the internet. And so it won't be long before it's, broadcast television. Broadcast television will always exist. You know why? Because it's the way to communicate to a city in a disaster, right? It's broadcast. It's out over the airways. As long as you don't knock the antenna down, right? You can still get communications from that television station to every home in the area, right? So broadcast television isn't going to go away, but cable television certainly is.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I have information for this fella and for everybody. I've been with Comcast forever, and some years ago I went through the same thing. I was paying a couple $100 a month, and I got a bill for $450. Called Comcast, told them I was going to stop the service, and they said no, and they put me on some special deal back to $200 a month. A year later, that expired. Called them again because the price went up. They again gave me a special deal. So that's what you got to do. Call Comcast, tell them you're quitting, and you'll go back to where you were. They always have some kind of a bonus program going that they can put you in.
Okay, any other questions for Jim? Okay. There you go, Sherm.
Thank you. Is your operation primarily a volunteer operation, or how do you get your funding to sustain your operation?
Okay. The funding, once again, it's through the Township of Moon, but the funding is from the franchise money that the cable carriers pay the township for the use of the public right-of-ways. Okay? And yes, we're primarily a volunteer organization. It's a community television station, so it's up to the residents of Moon to come and make television. We train them. They produce shows. Now we have a staff. In fact, one of the things I didn't mention is about 6 years ago, I stepped down as the director of Moon Community Access Television. I was doing a lot of IT work for the township as well as being their cable director. And of course, as we talk about, everything's internet these days, right? So my work as the IT director at Moon became so all-consuming that they decided they either needed to hire a full-time IT guy or hire a new MCA TV director. And so I said, well, look, if I get a choice, I'll do the IT work, right? But I'm still going to keep my hand in at MCA TV because I built it, right? Wasn't going to let it just wander away. So they said, look, if you want to take on that, so I still oversee the channel. I don't run it on a day-to-day basis, and I'm still their television engineer. But I have a director by the name of Allison Ford. She does the day-to-day operations, and there's an assistant director, Morgan Torsha, who's helps train volunteers and helps them do their programs. And she's also our graphic artist for the Township of Moon, so she does all the graphic work. So we're kind of the communications arm for the township. We don't just do television for them. We also publish their quarterly magazine. We do their e-newsletters. So there's a lot of things that go on out of Moon Community Access Television.
How much does the franchise fee of 5% actually amount to?
Good question. It depends on the size. Once again, it has to do with the number of subscribers, right? Well, Moon's a large community. It brings in over $450,000 a year to the Township of Moon, the franchise fees between both Verizon and Comcast. That's Moon, right? And of course, they use a good portion of that to fund Moon Community Access Television. I can't tell you we don't get it all. I would like to get it all. But they do use some of that franchise money, as any community can. They use their franchise money to fund whether it's a police officer or pave a road or whatever they want to do with that money, right? So at the end of the day, I'm obviously still grateful that we get what we do get from the township, because they don't have to give it to us. Not anymore. Like I said, as of 1984, they did have to give that money, right? Or at least the 2% extra had to go to funding your community station. But in '96, when the FCC got us again, and they said, anybody can get 5%. You don't have to fund your community station with it anymore. So.
My question is, many years ago I had a satellite dish, and I wasn't watching anything, so I got rid of it and put an antenna up, and I got excellent reception on about 35 channels.
Right.
3 weeks ago, all of a sudden, I have no connection at all on my television downstairs. On my upstairs television, I get all channel 13s, but that's all I can get. I've had a couple people look at it, they can't figure out what the problem is.
Well, I'd have to look at it. But I'll tell you one of the things that happened in broadcast television about 10 or so years back, maybe a little bit more, they changed how broadcast was working, right? It used to be like over a regular FM frequency, okay? Then they went digital. They squeezed everything together. Once again, it had to do with creating more bandwidth. And this bandwidth thing is not just on cable, but it's in the airwaves as well, right? Because as technology advances and we're using these things, right? And everybody's got one. Well, they take so much bandwidth out of the frequency range, okay? So to create more frequency, radio and television had to go digital. And then they do a thing called narrow banding, okay, which meant that the signal had to be much tighter in frequency because it's a digital frequency. Well, two things happen with that. One, when you get the signal, it's great, right? It's as clean as it can be. The problem is, as I talked about earlier with digital, it has to reach a certain threshold of signal, otherwise it doesn't show up at all. Right? It's not like the old television signal that was good old-fashioned FM modulated, and it was bouncing around and bouncing off the clouds or whatever, and you could pick up some of it and tune it in. This is digital. First off, it's straight line. Hits anything, it stops. Digital broadcasting has its advantages in that the quality is beautiful, but it has huge disadvantages in that it doesn't really go anywhere. So something may have happened with your antenna, would be my guess, that it's not having some difficulty picking up the frequencies that it once picked up.
Well, I had somebody check the antenna. They couldn't find anything wrong with it. But one of the problems might be I'm down in the deep valley with hillsides on each side. Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, well, this is how cable television started.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, that may be a good way to end the presentation. Jim, thank you very much.